I'm sure if you're looking to buy a home in this market, you're looking for all the tips you can get. Well, we've got some. Joining me today is Patti Berens from the Coldwell Banker Realty office in Colorado Springs. Hi, Patti.
Hi, Rick.
How are you doing today?
I'm great, thanks. It's good to see you again.
You too. This is a crazy market and, especially for buyers, so I hope you have some good tips for them.
I think we do, so
All right,
I'm happy to share them.
All right, well, let's get started. The first one is prepare before you shop. What do you mean by that?
Lay the groundwork. If you're thinking about buying, the time to start is today, not next year when you think you're going to actively be ready to list. Reach out to a real estate agent, talk to a professional, talk to a lender. Many of us have lenders we can recommend. The lenders can do a credit score check for you. You can see if you need some work to be done.
Okay.
And surprisingly, paying off some old debt is going to hurt your credit score rather than help your credit score. And asking a professional to help give you some guidance, you can start working on that credit score today so that you're prepared next year or in 6 months to buy. I've worked with a lot of clients that are, I've worked with them for a couple of years, and they're getting close to starting to purchase this winter, but only because they started working on it a couple of years ago.
So even if they're in the, they haven't, they need to get a house now, do you recommend they at least get pre-approved before they go out and start looking for houses?
Absolutely. You have to be pre-approved to even look at houses today. But sellers aren't going to even look at an offer that doesn't have a pre-approval and a letter from a lender saying that you are pre-approved. The other advantage is that I want to know what you're approved for, because if you're looking at $500,000 houses and you're only approved for $450,000, it doesn't matter. If you've seen one $600,000 house, you're never going to be happy with that $450,000 house.
Yeah. I
also don't care if you're approved for $600,000, but you don't want monthly payments that exceed what would be the equivalent of a $450,000 house. I don't want to show you a $600,000 house. I don't care what you're approved for. I want to show you the houses that are in your affordability, what you want to pay for a monthly mortgage.
In this market where houses are typically going for over ask, do you even start out lower than what they're approved for so that they have some headroom on there?
Very good question, and yes. Although it's different now, even than from 2 months ago. 2 months ago, I was probably starting at $20,000 less, just so that you'd have some room to go up on over asking. But we have 3 times as many houses on the market as we did in February or March of 2021, and it's supply versus demand. We have more available. Houses are staying on the market a little bit longer. And although you may still have to pay a little over asking, it's not like it was even just 2 months ago and even just a couple of weeks ago. So the market is volatile. It changes all the time.
Uh-huh.
And being prepared will help you in the long run find that being able to make the right offer for the right house.
And I'm sure it makes a lot of sense to hire someone like you because you can see those changes coming, whereas if you're just out on your own trying to find a house and driving by and calling different people, you may not even know.
Absolutely. Even during, it was probably back in April or May during some of the some of the craziness, I was able to help a buyer client of mine. We didn't make as big of an offer because that house had been on the market for longer. and they actually wanted to offer a little more than what I thought they would need to, and it worked for them because they got it for a few thousand less, simply because that particular house, it wasn't its first day on the market. It had
Right.
been on the market for a few weeks, and this seller was now ready to sell.
That's awesome. Well, the second tip is, what are the differences between different real estate agents and brokerage relationships?
Very good question. To simplify it, there's 3 different relationships in real estate. And as an agent, it's more like being the coach of a team. I try to put it into an easy analogy. You can make recommendations as an agent. You can make recommendations. You can make suggestions. And you want to coach your client through the process. A transaction broker is more like a referee. You're making sure that both sides are playing fairly, and they're both following the law. But
So
you
that's
can't give
somebody
advice.
who represents both buyers and sellers?
Exactly. A perfect example would be, I took a floor call a few weeks back, and the caller wanted to talk to just the listing agent, which is fine. That's their choice, because they felt like that would save them money in a very crazy market. My response to that is, no, it may save the seller money, because on occasion there may be a negotiation process for both sides, but in order for that agent to represent both the seller and the buyer, they're going to have to step down to be a transaction broker. And many of us can do it. We can do it well. But the reality is, do you want to coach or do you want to referee? And if you're a first-time home buyer, if you're somebody who needs a lot of advice, maybe it would behoove you to actually ask for an agent, which means you don't want to necessarily work with that listing agent. Having said all that, if you're an experienced buyer and you don't care one way or another, yes, call a listing agent. But I always recommend get your own agent, get your own coach. Let somebody who's working on your team, not just somebody who's making sure the game is played fairly.
Good point. And the third tip is communicate and ask questions before you sign.
Hiring an agent is contractual. You'll hire the agent. You want to make sure it's somebody that you can work with and work fairly, and that you are able to communicate with one another. Having said that, though, agents are working really hard. Buyers agents are working extremely hard, especially in this market. We might be putting out 8, 10, 12 offers just to get you under contract. They deserve to have an agreement with you, but don't hesitate to ask questions. Don't hesitate to ask how they're going to communicate with you, how they're going to show the houses, how involved they're going to be. Do they work with a team? Do they work solo? Once you sign that contract, are you going to be talking to them, or will you be talking to an assistant? Ask those questions. And I'm not saying one way is right and the other way is wrong. What I'm saying is you need to make sure that the person you're signing with is somebody you feel comfortable with, because you're going to be working with them closely in order to get under contract, number one. And then you want to be able to trust them and work with them and be able to reach them to get through the process to get to closing.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. Another tip, the fourth one, is using a VA loan, out-of-pocket expenses to consider. I know down in the Springs you have a lot of veterans and people in the military. Tell me about that.
Well, with the VA loan, they don't have to pay a down payment. They pay what is called a VA funding fee, which, by the way, if any veteran has any percentage of disability, that VA funding fee is waived. However, they still have to have the earnest money. So to make an offer on a home, they're going to have cash in hand to pay earnest money to put the house under contract. That money is money that can be applied towards their closing costs at the end, or they could get it back working with the lender. But it's money they have to pay out of pocket. They also, I recommend any buyer get a homeowner's inspection or a home inspection. And that's money that's out of pocket. And that's money that they have to have because the inspector is going to have to be paid. The lender, depending on who the lender is, many of them require that the appraisal be paid up front. So although they're not paying a down payment, that is true, they are looking at least probably about $1,500, probably about $1,500 to $3,000 out of pocket, some of which can be refunded at closing. They can get back. But you have to have that money in order to start the home buying process.
That's a really good tip, as are the previous three. And this last one is super important. Be flexible, patient, decisive, and persistent. And I assume that's because we're in a seller's market.
That is absolutely true. I'm going to try to prepare my buyers as much as possible that we're in it for the long haul. In the market that we have seen in our rearview mirror, but it could come around any other time. We could see a house and it would be under contract in less than an hour before we even had time to write an offer. I also will tell my buyers, you might be prepared to have to make offers more than once. I think my record was 8 offers for one client. But I promise you that the house you get will be the right one. But you have to be flexible. You have to realize that each offer you make is a learning process, because none of us want to come out of the gate and pay over asking or offer to pay their own title insurance or any those kind of examples. We don't want to do that right away. It's a learning experience. So if you want to get a deal, I'm willing to write that offer the first time, and you're not going to probably get that house. Although that's a reflection of the market from a couple months ago. And the market's changed a little bit. So what we're talking about today could be different even in a month. And every situation has to be evaluated. But you have to be flexible, because you have to be prepared to learn with each offer you write. You have to be patient, but you also have to be decisive. If you've looked at a house, you really like it, you don't have 24 to 48 hours to think about whether or not you're going to make an offer. You need to look at the comps and be prepared to write the most you're willing to pay for that home. And that's also a very personal decision, because for somebody, it may not be $1 over asking, and for somebody else, that's their house. They can feel it. The house speaks to them. It really does. And they're the ones that has to make the decision as to what that price is.
Well, these are all great tips. If somebody wants to get a hold of you and maybe talk further about other tips you may have, are these great numbers, or can they reach you at this email address?
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
Terrific. I appreciate your time today. And if you have any questions, please call Patti. I'm sure she'd love to talk to you. Thanks again, Patti.
Thank you.
For more real estate news, go to retoday.com.